Welcome to SethCraft. I'm building a 20 by 30 shop, as you can see behind me here. I've already got the footers poured, the blocks in, the skids done, and the moisture barrier is installed. So in this video, I'm going to be building that frame for the 20 by 30 shop. All right, let's go ahead and jump into it. I'm using treated 2x6s for my frame. I'm going to go ahead and get one of the corners laid out here. So I'm going to go ahead and build the perimeter first, or the outside. And so I'm gonna go ahead and get these two right here, and we will cut down as need be. Checking the dimensions of my first 2x6, I noticed that it is a 1/2 inch too big, so let's go ahead and trim that down. All right, we measure down here. Yep, we are a 1/2 inch too big. Cut that off right there. Now I don't have a nail gun, so I'm going to use a combination of screws and nails here on these corners. These screws will simply just hold it into place, and then I will drive some nails in there in just a moment. If you have a nail gun, of course, it's going to make this process go a whole lot faster. But anyway, I'm going to match these up here on the corner and then get this screwed into position, making sure it's flush. I'm going to repeat this same process on the other 3 corners. I now have all 4 corners built, just like this first one right here. So in between the 2 10-foot boards, I'm going to install a scab. This is simply just a 2x6 that's going to span the gap between the 2 pieces. So I've got this gap right here. I need to make sure that is closed up. And then I'm going to take a scrap 2x6 and put that right in here. And that's just going to basically connect both of these boards together. Now on the sides, we've already got this board right here, which is somewhere between 10 foot and a 1/2 inch or 10 foot and 1 inch. I did not measure. There's also the gain of 1.5 inches over here where this board was on that. And so what I need to do is measure both of these, both sides of the edge over here. This one, we've got 10 foot, 2 inch, and 1/8. And I'm gonna measure the other side, and we'll know what to cut the middle board so that we have a total of 30 foot. Both of those sides wound up being 122 and 1/8 inches, so that means I need to have one board in the middle that's 115 and 3/4. So let's go ahead and cut that board real quick. 115, 3/4. We can use those scab boards to connect this between those 2 sides as well. Now there may be other ways to get these boards combined than these scabs here, but to be honest, once you get the sheathing on top of this frame, it's going to be so well locked down together that I don't think it's going to make much of a difference. The outside of the frame is done. Now it's time to work on the middle. So it's very similar to how the sides were done. And the way my skid is laid out, this board will rest here all the way down. And what I'm going to do here is put a screw in at an angle, kind of toenail it right here in the center. And that will attach this middle board to this middle piece right here. I have some longer 3.5 inch screws that I'm going to be putting in here. And before I tighten that one down all the way, I'm going to move over to the other side and do one on this side so that it will prevent it from scooting over whenever I tighten it. Now, just like I did with the sides, I'm going to place my next board in here and then use another one of these scabs to bridge this gap. Now for the center board, this has to also equal 30 foot. And so I'm going to measure the board that was just installed from the very outside of the building. And this comes to 244 and 3/8. So then I need to step down here on the other side. I need to also take into account we've got 3 inches, which is what you would expect. So what we have left in between here to make up 30 foot is what we need to cut. After doing the math on this board, I've got 112 and 5/8. Just like the other side, I'm going to match this up to the center which I actually need to pull the outside frame this way a little bit. Yeah, about right there. We'll be squaring this up here in just a moment, but all right, there we go. Got that where it needs to be, lined up. Now it's time for a very important step in this build. It's squaring up this frame. So I have placed a screw on these front two corners, and I'm gonna use my tape measure, and I should see 36 feet on the dot whenever I go from corner to corner in the diagonal. So let me walk over there and we'll see what we get. Okay, let's see what we get here. All right, so 36. Well, let me see if I can tighten this up just a little. All right, we're off by 2 inches from being square. Let me test the other way and see what it says real quick. All right, measuring this way. So let's get that a little bit tighter. So we are about 1 inch, well, almost 1 inch off from this direction. So looks like I need to move things around just a bit. Now that I have my frame squared out, it's time to mark for the joists. I'm gonna be installing at 24" on center, which means I need to take my tape measure here on this end, and every 2 feet, I'm going to make a mark. So 24 foot right here. What I want to do is move out 3/4 of an inch on both sides of the 24, and that will let me know where my joist is going to go. All right, so right there is where the first joist is going to go. I'll move down to the next 24, which here is 48. Here we got 6 foot, moving back 3/4 of an inch, going back the other way 3/4 of an inch. All right, there we go. Now moving on to the center board, starting from the same side over here. I'm going to do the same where I move down every 2 feet and make a mark. Starting from the same side allows me to make sure that I have consistency. So whenever I go to put in my joists, they will all start off from the same spot here. Now my joists in here need to go from the middle board over to the edge. And so I'm going to measure out here. I've got 119 minus that one. We got 117.5 is going to be my joist here. And so that's going to go at the 2 foot mark from here over to there. Let's cut our first one out. Now before I toss this board in here, I want to look down the board and see if there is an obvious crown. And that means where it is bowing on the long side, either up or down. And so from what I'm seeing, this side right here is where it bows up. And so I'm going to put that one facing up so that if there's ever a time where it starts to sag down, it'll just become more flat over time. So anyway, that's the concept. So I'm going to stick to it. Okay, I'm going to match up the markings I made. Now, like I said before, I'm going to be using nails and screws. So I'm going to just get this in position with a screw, and then I'll finish it with some nails here in just a moment. But I've got some 3.5 inch screws. Just going to put in here. Make sure this is lined up and also flush up top. If you have a nail gun, this is the step that it would make it a lot easier. I worked some without you on my project here, but I wanted to mention this. I have a center board going through the middle of my building. And so if I attach a joist to this middle right here, I can put my nails and screws on the outside and the inside. But whenever I go to put the other side, the joist in, I'm unable to access from the middle because the other joist is blocking that space. So what I am doing is using a 2x6 joist hanger, and that way, for let's say I put this one in here, I can then use this joist hanger to attach the other one and keep all of my joists in a straight line. So I'm just alternating. So one will be on this side of the middle board, flip it over, move down 2 feet, and put it on the other side for this. So let's go ahead and I'll install one of these so you can see what I'm doing. The total width of my building is 20 foot. But I have to keep in mind that I have 1.5 inches on both sides, which is 3 inches total, and also the 1.5-inch board running through the middle. That puts my joists at 117 3/4 inch for both of them to match the 20-foot span that I need. So let's go ahead and cut that. Going to measure out 117 3/4 inch. I like to use my speed square as a cutting guide. The first joist over here is going to be installed without a joist hanger. So I will match this up. I have my center line right there. And now I can just simply take my nails and screws and get this one installed. And you'll see, if I were to try to install the other one right here, it would not work because I wouldn't have access to the back like this. Now to install the other side, I can just move the board into place, and I will put the joist hanger up under here. Then I can use some of these 1.25 inch nails to hold that joist hanger in place. Now I can take some of my longer 3.5 inch nails, place it into that joist hanger. Now I have those joists in a straight line and don't have to worry about trying to access that from the back of the board. I just finished getting the last of the joists installed here. I did that without you because it was raining. I like to share the mistakes that I'm aware of, and I'm aware of 2 of them that I've made, so let's take a look at that real quick. My first mistake is that I used the wrong line to mark my joist right here on the very first one. I'm off by 3/4 inch. Now that won't affect the strength any, but it will affect my line for whenever I am putting down my my plywood on top of that. Luckily, it's going to be in the middle, so I just have to remember to offset a little bit there. Now my next mistake is that I should have made my blocks here, the scab blocks, a little bit longer, because you can see that my joist ends right there on that. Had I brought it another 3 or 4 inches out, then I could have used that joist hanger just fine. The same thing occurred right over here on this one. I really could have used just making that a little bit longer so that my joist would have made a better connection. See if I can get some better light for you. Anyway, those are the 2 mistakes that I'm aware of. Everything else seems to have come together very nicely. Now, there was one spot where it's either the joist is just got the crest coming up, or my foundation is a little bit less flat there, but I've got right around a 1/2 inch or so that needed to have touched. But anyway, other than that, all the rest of them are right where they should be, touching those skids. Now there is one more thing that I have to do. Whenever I install my flooring, it's going to be 4 foot by 8 foot sheets of 3/4 inch plywood, and the edges need to terminate on one of the joists. But on the side going this way, it needs to have blocking installed so that I will have an edge to put the end of the plywood onto. So what we're going to do is stagger that floor, which means I also have to stagger these blocking. So let's go ahead and begin that. Starting here on the front corner, I'm going to measure out 8 feet from the edge right over here. So 8 feet comes to this spot right here, and I'm just going to make a mark there, and that's going to be the center of my blocking board. I'm going to move over here to this next one and also transfer that 8 foot mark, and then one more time over here on the next one. Running my tape measure from that far end over there, I'm going to mark at 16 feet, which is right here, and do that on the next 2 joists. Okay, and lastly, need it right here on this one. Yep, spot on 4 feet. So what I want to do now is stagger these floor pieces. So I'm going to move over here to this next one right here, and I'm going to measure out 8 feet from this direction. All right, so I need 8 feet right here. I also need to put 8 foot over here because that blocking board will be on the inside of this one. And then lastly, move over here to this one and mark 8 feet again. And I will just continue down the line. So I need to have 16 feet on this next side over here, and that will get the stagger pattern that will continue out through the rest of the building. Now keep in mind that I messed up on this first joist spacing, so these first two will be a little bit off, but after that they should be rather consistent. So between the two here, I need to cut a blocking board that is 22 3/8. All right, 22 3/8. Once again, I like to use screws because first of all, it helps hold the board in the right level position, but also it's a lot easier. It needs to be right in the center of that line that I made earlier. Otherwise, the plywood that I use for the flooring won't have an edge to rest on. All right, my next measurement between these two is going to be 21 3/4. Now you'll notice that if I try to install this right now, it will interfere with being able to attach this from the other side. So what I can do is either nail in from this side at an angle or this side at an angle with some screws or nails, and that will get that to where it needs to be. So to make this a little easier on me, I'm going to start with the available side over here. Line this up flush and center to the line. I believe in this case I'm going to angle my screw a little bit from this other side. That's just an easy way to get that done. It'll hold it in place, and I can even put a nail at an angle if I want. Now it's time to move on to the next side down here and then continue this process all along the way. So I won't bore you with that. I'll bring you back whenever I'm done. My neighbor stopped by and suggested that I run my sheets of plywood in the opposite direction. I was initially going to run them this way, and he said it'd be a lot stronger if you ran them this way. And so, without you, I have continued to put in blocking on every one of these joist spacing, and that way they are 4 foot apart. And so whenever I go to install my sheathing or my plywood, they will have a place to rest on every edge going down. So I'm still going to stagger them, so I'll have a full sheet at first, and then I'll move over to a 4 foot and then continue it out and kind of stagger it that way for extra strength. So what I'm doing now is continuing down on this side and getting the blocks installed. And so it's the same process as doing what I showed before, except I'm doing it on every one. And because I'm using 24-inch on center joists, that'll give a little extra support to have all of these going down here in the middle. I finished up all 4 rows of blocking. It rained a lot this past week, so most of what I did was without you, but it's so nice to have all 4 rows of those done so that my sheets of plywood will have an edge to sit on in all different sides. So definitely glad to have that done. There is one more task to complete before the framing of the floor is done, and that is to use some of these 3.5-inch screws to tie down the frame to the skids here. So I'm just gonna go through here and maybe every other, or even skip a couple, just put a couple of screws in those joists to lock it down to the skids. And not necessary, I just want to do it to make sure those skids never move around if I ever hit them with something. You know, four-wheeler hits them or something like that. So where the joist meets the skid, I'm just going to take one of these 3.5-inch screws and angle it down so that it locks that into place. And I'm going to skip one or two and do that again on all 4 of these skids. After building the frame, I'm very pleased to say that the skids were all leveled out as I had hoped they would be. Like I mentioned before, right over in that area there was a little bit of a dip, but I'm not concerned about it. So as far as the left to right being even, I think things are looking pretty good. There was one spot I had right over here that was a little bit off, but it's still going to land the plywood on the board, so still going to be good enough. Let's see, which one was it? Right about there is where it kind of went a little off, but very good. So definitely going to be good to work on such a solid base. Now, some people may be concerned that using 2x6 is not going to be nearly as strong as 2x8. I don't intend on ever putting anything that heavy in here. Whenever I built my other shop over here, I did use 2x8s because I keep a lawnmower and a 4-wheeler in there. And honestly, I've had no creaking or moving in that. So I think right here with this 2x6, it's going to be just fine. And I'm now done framing the floor of my 20x30 shop. I'm very pleased with the results here. If you've enjoyed the video, be sure to hit the thumbs up button, subscribe, and notification bell. The next step in my build is to insulate this floor. So if you're interested in watching a floor insulation, then be sure to stay tuned to the next video. If you've missed a video in the series, I'll have a link to that in the description down below. Otherwise, you can just find it here on the SethCraft channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.